on today's Edge of Wonder.
The cabal was trying to nuke America.
Say what, David?
If you're not brave enough to stand up to us, then you deserve to be enslaved. That's literally what they think. This led to the creation of something called the Plan.
And what could this plan reveal?
The Alliance has been working over and over again to try to get disclosure. They've got recordings inside the White House. They've got recordings from Bohemian Grove. They've got recordings of ritual sacrifices. And don't tell me that this is all coincidence. People really shouldn't be afraid to learn the truth.
So get ready for some Edge of Wonder truth bombs.
I do believe they will succeed.
In part 2 of this David Wilcock exclusive. And now, your hosts, Ben and Rob.
So we just interviewed Laura Eisenhower. That was our recent video that we just published specifically on satanic ritual abuse. And we get right into like Hollywood, and she's explaining some of the clients that she has and their experience. So everything you're talking about is like exactly what we've been focusing on in the last few episodes that we've made, specifically about like all this satanic stuff. I mean, you look at, there's like, I don't even know what they're called anymore, this Korean pop band.
K-pop?
They have like 100 million views, it was 120 million views they had within like a day or something like that, you know?
Oh, and the Illuminati symbolism in the K-pop
videos
it's totally outrageous.
Completely. I mean, it's like over the top. I don't know if you've watched any. You should check it out after the video. Just watch these K-pop things and you'll just see it everywhere. It's nuts.
Maybe you don't.
I actually think in the future you're going to have entire college degrees that people can get just focused on, in the aftermath of the mass arrests, in the aftermath of the cabal's defeat, where people spend their whole college curriculum just tracking the enormity of symbolism that they were deploying into our culture, which is really audacious. But remember, they have to do this. They have a belief system that tells them that the only way they can maintain the money and the power that they have is to hide it out in the open. In other words, they feel they have rules and that they are required to do this. They are required to openly advertise, to show us what they're doing, so that the idea is, if you're not brave enough to stand up to us, then you deserve to be enslaved. That's literally what they think. But then the funny part is that, you know, there's this sort of paranoid schizophrenia that a lot of people get somewhat of a taste of. And it's very important to remember that, you know, they can listen to everybody's phone and laptop or whatever, but there's nowhere near enough staff to go after the awakening, to prosecute the awakening. It's very, very, very rare that even some of the most awakened truthers will ever even get 10 seconds of attention from a live agent working for the cabal. And they have really done an amazing, amazing con job of making people think that they have so many personnel, that they have so many boots on the ground. I mean, we literally have, and it's funny because now with Above Majestic coming out, there are people, we had this whole email exchange actually where someone who was taking one of my wife's classes had just promoted Above Majestic on her Facebook page, or I think it was Instagram, and then she started to make correlations with anything bad that happened in her life as if it was because she had promoted our movie. She got so freaked out about the boogeyman, the monster under the bed, that she started to think, oh my God, my cats got sick and their noses, you know, there's runny noses on my cats. And it's like, wait a minute, whoa, hold on. These people do not have the staff to knock on your door tomorrow morning. How the hell have I been doing this for 25 years and I'm still alive if they're so good at this? If they're so good at threatening people, stopping you from talking, playing the gun of the money where they got a fistful of $100 bills in one hand and a gun in the other, and they say, I'm not leaving unless I give you one of these two things. That's never happened to me. you know? And I'm a very prominent person exposing this stuff with millions of followers like you guys. So you don't need to worry about them. They don't have anywhere near enough staff to go after people. And so therefore, people really shouldn't be afraid to learn the truth. Just watching videos and becoming involved. Look, there's hundreds of millions of people learning about this, and they have probably not even 100,000 people that they could actually use to go after you. So it's completely ridiculous to be afraid of learning the truth at this point.
We've heard from a lot of different sources that a lot of the people who were maybe kind of, not necessarily, I don't want to say really evil maybe, but just kind of involved with all that, are starting to really break away now. I think with the QAnon movement and everything, they're seeing the truth and they're like, okay, there's hope. I'm leaving this completely. I'm turning away from all these people and I'm gonna join like the good side and fight against them and whatnot. And we're starting to see that happen a lot more. And like people, like new channels are coming up, and that's what people are saying to us too. Like, wow, you guys just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's just, I think it's just this cosmic timing that all these things are just kind of happening together. And when these things kind of happen, it's like there is this divine influence that just kind of, whether people just get ideas, dreams, or actually visions, whatever happens, it's like they're being told, it's like it's time to come out. And that's what I felt with us as well. And I think we're seeing this a lot more. And Above Majestic, I feel like plays into that cosmic timing.
It's a very brave movie. It's a very ballsy movie. I was aware that the stuff that I committed to that tape was painting a target on me, you know, because there was an original shot that we did early in the year, and I saw an initial edit of the film, and I had this hair sticking out and floating 2 inches away from my head over here, and it was just not, the shot didn't look good, and I wasn't happy with the quality of the shot. But I also saw what was chosen in terms of the information for the film, and so I went through and I transcribed all that stuff, and then I rewrote it, and I added a whole bunch of new stuff in writing, and then I memorized that, and then I retaped it with all the new information. And that really, really transformed the film very dramatically. But the things that I added in were very brave. And it's the most daring presentation I've ever given, really.
The Germans had a settlement on the moon, they had a settlement on Mars, and they were doing this as early as 1939. Extraterrestrial spacecraft have appeared over nuclear missile installations and have completely powered them down.
So then to see that we took that kind of a risk and the film goes to #1 was extremely rewarding. We're not in a reality anymore where people are going to laugh at you about this stuff.
This film is the red pill that wakes you up to what's really going on in the world. And at some point, this is all going to break open. The more you get involved, the more compromised you become. They may actually kill you.
Okay, so David, Ben and I saw you at Contact in the Desert, and we watched your entire presentation that covered the Cabal and 9/11. And we were wondering if you can kind of go over some of that with us. Like, we'd like to hear a little bit more about Whitewater and Oklahoma City bombing and maybe 9/11 as well.
Well, and then coming into 9/11.
Right.
Like,
I mean, we had a live episode after that where we were totally blown away by that, by the way. It was an awesome presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, obviously that's a huge subject because really what I was doing was sort of tracing the history of the Alliance and informing the audience that this is not anything new. There has been an organized effort to go after this cabal for many, many years. And there were a couple different ways that it happened. One of the ways was Howard Hughes, the aircraft tycoon. Because Hughes had Hughes Aircraft Company, which was one of the big military defense contractors, And he became aware that the other contractors were getting these sweetheart deals, that he was never even given an opportunity to outbid them, and became aware that they were working on really weird exotic technology that Hughes wasn't being given access to, okay? So Howard Hughes hired female sex workers, but specially trained as agents. Like, they do assassinations and they get information, and they use sex to do that. So a typical example, I mean, thank God nobody's done this to me, because it's, you know, you might think as a guy that you'd want to be seduced, but not one of these. But let's just say that you're targeted, you're part of the cabal in this case, because that's what Howard Hughes did. He used these women to target people in the cabal. So here's what would happen. You happen to be somewhere, you know, this woman comes up to you, she's really extremely unusually good looking. And they'll pick, only women that have that level of attractiveness will be picked for this kind of a job. She will come on to you really strongly and tell you, you know, make it very clear that she is interested in having sex with you right away. If you're dumb enough to fall for this, which a lot of people are, you know, because these women are really good at it. If they're trained, they really know what they're doing. So you end up in bed with them, and they will actually carry through with the whole thing. And a lot of times what they'll use is a drug. And so you will be drugged at some point, and then after the whole act has been finished, they'll open up to you as if they're now like gonna be your girlfriend or your wife in the future or whatever. And you're softened up by the drugs and the fact that you had sexual intercourse. And so these women would get these guys to tell them really amazing secrets. And so this is where Howard Hughes deployed multiple women, you know, who now we would think of them as like CIA agents or something like that. They didn't have that back then. Maybe they had the OSS, but, you know, there still was training of this sort going on for women and men. So what they found, what Howard Hughes discovered from these women was that there were people in a satanic cult running these defense contractor companies. The cult believed in Lucifer being the good guy and not Satan. They don't believe in Satan. They think Satan's a myth. But then they think that the God of the Western traditions, the Abrahamic religions, which is Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they think that God is actually an evil imposter. And there's different words for it. They'll call it the egregore, or they'll call it the demiurge, which means half God. And egregore is the word root of egregious, which means really disgusting. So they think that the God that most of us believe is true is really disgusting, and that it's not a real God, that it's this trap. So these sex courier women basically are learning all this stuff, that these people believed that they were the descendants of beings that crash landed on this planet from our solar system, from an ancient civilization, which is Mars in part, and also the destroyed planet, which became the asteroid belt. And that's the whole thing we talk about in Above Majestic. These people have elongated skulls in their pure form. And so they believe that the elongated skull phenology is the phenology of Lucifer as a race. They literally believe Lucifer is a flesh and blood human who crash landed on Earth with his cohorts, populated the planet, and they are all blood descendants of Lucifer. So we talk about this quite a bit in Above Majestic. It's very daring stuff. I'm not going to get into all of it right now, but you can watch the movie and learn all this. So the point is, all this information got back to Howard Hughes, and he's seeing, well, these people actually think of themselves as an invading race, a different race of people, different types of humans. And they have taken over the press, they've taken over the media with television, film, music, they've taken over the judiciary, a lot of the police in the managerial levels, the military, educational system, big agriculture, big pharma. It's almost crazy to conceive of how vast this control matrix is. Now, Howard Hughes passed this information along to certain American generals who were not part of the cabal, who he felt he could trust. The next big event that I talked about in that speech at Contact and Desert that you guys are referring to was that in the Korean War, the American troop positions were getting compromised. And they would go to a certain place where the battle plan said that they were going to set up their staging area, and every damn time they got ambushed, the Koreans were ahead of them. The Koreans blew them up, killed a whole bunch of soldiers. So what did they do? They said, we got to figure out where the leak is because somebody is ratting us out. So they looked at the list of who they have to tell their troop positions to by international law, and they put little pieces of disinformation in each one. And it came back that the place that was compromised was the United Nations, because by law, thanks to international treaties, they were required to tell the United Nations where their troop positions were going to be. And when they gave the UN a fake troop position, that's where the ambush was. At this point, and this again, the Korean War, for those of you who don't really have a full grasp of the history, this was in the mid-1950s now, okay? This led to the creation of something called the Plan, which over time became a 5-inch thick binder. And the plan was intended to disclose to the people that were involved in doing it how they could actually defeat the cabal. How could they overthrow the cabal? Eisenhower appears to have been aware of this plan and was partly involved in drawing it up, which is why he did his infamous warning about the military-industrial complex at the end of his speech. Kennedy goes into office from the beginning, working for the alliance, from the beginning, working to try to do the plan. And the Cuban Missile Crisis literally was intended to work. The cabal was trying to nuke America, and it was only through the work of the alliance that that plan was stopped, because the cabal was going to have a first strike capability out of Cuba to hit the U.S. with missiles before the U.S. missiles could get to the Soviet Union. So that was not BS, okay? Where Kennedy really got into trouble was when he tried to nationalize the assets of the U.S. Treasury, which you'd say, well, wait a minute, David, aren't they already nationalized? The Treasury was trying to sell off all their silver. And what Kennedy did is to stop the sale of silver and to issue silver-backed money that was presidentially issued from the Treasury, not the Federal Reserve, which, as we know, is not a federal and has no reserve, right? This money was going to be Treasury notes and not under the control of international bankers. And so that's the circumstances leading to his assassination. And I talked about in that show that after Kennedy was assassinated, they come out with this movie, Manchurian Candidate, which really, really explains what the cabal is doing, how they manipulate politics, all this really amazing stuff. And as we go forward in time, you guys mentioned Oklahoma City, and that is a really fascinating discussion because the alliance has been working over and over again to try to get disclosure. They were going to use Reagan, and Reagan was going to come clean, and then before he could, they tried to shoot him, and then Brady stumbled and took the bullet instead that would have hit Reagan if Brady hadn't have fallen the way he did. So a lot of weird stuff. The whole thing that Reagan was trying to do with Gorbachev for glasnost and perestroika to denuclearize, that was not something the cabal wanted. That was Reagan working on his own, okay? The Iran-Contra scandal, 1987, was the alliance trying to destroy the cabal, right? Because you find out that they're selling arms to Iran, right? Which is a terrorist regime. They're taking the money from that, and then they're also using the money from selling illegally our own best weapons to terrorists, and then they're financing this group in Mesoamerica called the Contras, who are terrorists, okay? They'll cut you open and pull your tongue out through your neck, because those are the people that are making sure the cocaine business doesn't get interrupted. And it's like, holy crap, wait a minute, you're saying they're selling American, the best stuff we got, they're selling them to the Iranians, who are terrorists, who we're supposedly fighting. They take the money, and then they use the money to finance another terrorist group that makes sure that the cocaine business runs. Oh, wow, right? Like, and then the chain of this conspiracy went right up through the Secretary of Defense, right to the president. And then he goes, oh, well, I fell asleep in that meeting. I forgot. I don't remember anything. I have no memory, And then how in the world did George H.W. Bush Sr. win the election the year after, when the whole administration has been implicated in arming terrorists and financing the cocaine business? Literally, right? So this is where you then get, as the alliance continues progressing forward, they want to target the Clintons, because the Clintons are very corrupt, because Mena, Arkansas, if you watch this movie, I highly recommend, even if you don't like Tom Cruise, just get over it and watch the movie. It's called American Made, okay? I happen to love Tom Cruise as an actor. It's an amazing movie. So watch American Made, and it tells you the story of how this weird backwater town in Arkansas gets turned into the cocaine distribution hub for all of America. It's the main place. They get all these banks, all this money flows through. They build an entire airport just for these cocaine planes to come in. And that's where all the cocaine for America is coming through. I mean, they had other ways of getting it in, but that was essentially the central distribution point. So, what state was Bill Clinton the governor of? Oh, that's right, Arkansas. Yeah.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but you did.
So, isn't it funny that Iran-Contra exposes this cocaine trade? It's running through Arkansas. Then they have Clinton investigated by Kenneth Starr in the Whitewater investigation, right? And the real meat of the Whitewater investigation was all of this stuff with Mena, Arkansas, and the cocaine business, okay? So now try to wrap your head around this one. The Whitewater investigation was closing in on this. They were getting ready to blow the lid off of the thing. They had a whole group of flag officers, high-level military generals, who were on a plane that included a POW who had been written off for dead by the United States in Vietnam, but they actually knew the whole time that he was still alive. And just like in the movie First Blood, Rambo Part 1, right, with Sylvester Stallone, they abandoned these POWs. This guy was like the real Rambo in the plane, okay? And that plane gets downed, and it's very suspicious. You got like 22 military officials or something. I forget how many, but it was a lot. In the plane goes down in flames. Everybody's all weirded out about this, but there's hardly any coverage of it in the news. And then just 3 or 4 days later, you have the Oklahoma City bombing, which again is very, very strange, because this little van with fertilizer in it should not have been enough explosive power at all to blow off the entire front face of this federal Alfred P. Murrah building, okay? But the part that you don't know, unless you watched my talk, or if you're very educated, because this took me a lot of years to put this together and a lot of insiders, the part you don't know, and I learned this from Pete Peterson, very secret, was that all of the damning documents for the Whitewater investigation against the Clintons were being stored in the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. So they literally torched the plane that had the people that were going to indict Clinton, and then they blew up the building that had the documents that they were going to use to indict Clinton just a couple of days later. And don't tell me that this is all coincidence. So they know this. The alliance knows this. And then they did the same thing in 9/11, right? It's the same idea. It's a controlled demolition, whereas in Oklahoma City, the explosives failed and they didn't get the whole building. They only got the front, okay? 9/11, they practiced. They got it right. They took the whole buildings down into their footprint, including Building 9. We talk about this very nicely in Above Majestic. And they also hit the Pentagon. And what people don't realize is that it hit the lower level of the Pentagon, the bottom floor, and it wasn't a plane, it was a missile. They fired that missile right into the office of the Navy that was the central coordinating hub for the alliance, bringing the cabal down. So all the documents got wiped out. They had a lot of stuff in the World Trade Center building for the alliance's investigations that got wiped out. Nobody really saw this coming. It was a total surprise attack. Since that time, the alliance has got an amazing treasure trove of stuff. They have these little tiny cameras that hide inside the screw, like, for example, on a fire alarm. It's a little tiny dot. You don't even see it because it's in the middle of a Phillips head screw, but there's a camera in there. And so they had that stuff long before it showed up in smartphones. They've got recordings inside the White House. They've got recordings from Bohemian Grove. They've got recordings of ritual sacrifices. This is the alliance now. They've got an unbelievable amount of totally incriminating information that they could use against the cabal. This is why the cabal has come out with this Adobe technology where you can fake somebody's voice and fake them talking, and so you can't really tell if something is real or not anymore, you know? But believe me, the alliance is going to succeed, and these are just some of the multiple events where the alliance almost made it, and then it didn't quite happen, and they had to keep working. But now, with the sealed indictments and with what we're having happen with Q, I mean, they have a lot of people on this thing, and it is building up to some really stunning public event that's going to be happening not too far from now, if we get lucky, and I hope we do. They keep trying to do this. They keep getting thrown off. It's a fight to the death with the cabal, but I do believe they will succeed.
So wait, first of all, Did y'all at home hear that? There's a lot of hope, right? Because I think a lot of people with the cabal always feel like everything's hopeless, and you know, a lot of people, we're all so focused on the deep state and on exposing the deep state that we forget to tell the side of the alliance, which is why I think it's so important what you're saying right now. And then
going back to the Pentagon, you said that most of us were convinced that a missile hit the Pentagon, but recently when QAnon did the Q&A, he said a plane, which shocked the entire community of these people. He actually said a plane hit he's like, it was something about a plane did hit the Pentagon.
9/11 is way, way, way more complicated than even most of the expert 9/11 truthers truly understand from all the research I've done. Because remember, I was, to use the colloquial term, I was woke about the cabal before 9/11. I was having dreams about something like 9/11 for years before it happened. And when it finally happened, it's like, okay, now it all makes sense. And the day of 9/11, I published an article on my website summarizing dreams I'd made public that were prophecies of 9/11. Very, very direct prophecies of 9/11, okay? So with all that being said, the backstory is really strange, and it's a lot more complex than people realize. And it gets back into things like the Operation Northwoods document from the Kennedy administration, in which they were told in this document, the Joint Chiefs were presenting this to Kennedy as a plan, that they could hijack airliners, crash them into American landmarks, blame it on the Cubans as a pretext to invade Cuba over this nuclear buildup that was going on there. And Kennedy rejected the plan. So bearing that in mind, that we already know it was on the books that they would try to do something like this as a staged terror, false flag, quote-unquote event. We explain what that means in Above Majestic. There's a lot more about all this kind of stuff in the movie. I highly recommend it. But getting back to this 9/11 thing, the actual intel appears to be, this is very strange, but check it out, okay? The original passenger airliners, this is what my research has concluded, and other people might want to argue with me on this, and that's fine. Like it says in the Northwoods document, the original airliners were replaced with other planes that looked the same but did not have passengers. So what happens is the planes take off, they land at certain airfields, but when they took off, before they landed, a gas was released inside the plane that knocked everybody out. Didn't kill them, knocked them out. The people did not die in 9/11 in the planes, okay? They landed and then they were resuscitated, and then at that point you get brought into these underground bases and you spend the rest of your life working. You're never gonna see above ground again. That's where most likely these people from 9/11 went. They went into these underground cities. And then they take off other planes that then complete the mission, and those planes even more than the original ones, but all the planes actually could be flied remotely from the ground taking off to the landing, that the whole thing can be steered remotely. And my insider, Henry Deacon, one of his amazing pieces of testimony is that he was in the UK military base where they were actually steering the planes into the World Trade Center, and he watched them with the heads-up display, seeing what was on the plane with the joystick, okay, steering it into the World Trade Center. And he said his greatest regret was that he didn't go and destroy the computer system and throw off the whole thing. He watched it happen. That's a pretty heavy story.
That's a very heavy story.
Yeah, tell me about it. Now, so regarding the Pentagon, I could buy that there was a drone, a small plane, that hit the Pentagon, that the wings folded and it went in through that little hole. But it definitely would not have been a full-size airliner. And it would have had to have been very precisely steered, because the regular airliner couldn't even get that close to the ground without screwing up its flight pattern. So it would have to have been a smaller plane. But I could see some kind of drone aircraft, some kind of plane, and not just a missile.
Well, also going back to the 9/11 and the Pentagon, I also heard that because right before that, right, they found that trillions of dollars were missing from the government, and they're like, what happened to these trillions of dollars? I heard that where they were investigating and doing all like the people who were doing the actual investigation, where the Pentagon actually got hit.
Yeah, so it was naval intelligence. The part of the Pentagon that got hit was the Naval Intelligence Command, and you know, not to be favoritist towards one part of the military, but from all the briefings I've gotten, it seems like the Navy is pretty much your best buddy when it comes to the alliance. That's really where a lot of this has come out of. And remember also that the Marines technically are not a separate division of the military. They're sort of a subdivision of the Navy, okay? The history of that is that in World War II, the Navy was on aircraft carriers, and it was self-contained, patriotic Americans working within the US, whereas the Air Force was actually dealing with the British against Hitler, and the Air Force apparently got more of this cabal involvement. So there's been this kind of shadow war going on between the Air Force and the Navy for decades. So it's complicated because the alliance really is a Navy operation, and it has been, because they didn't get penetrated by the cabal in World War II anywhere near as much. So anyway, I wanted to toss that in, but go ahead.
We have some people that we've been talking to too, and they've said the exact same thing about the Navy. They're like, you can basically trust the Navy, like the Navy is on your side. We've had questions about different aspects of the Air Force. We're still not, you know.
Well, and if we have anyone here in service watching us on the Air Force,
yes,
you probably don't know about any of this, and that's good. But this stuff
we're
is
talking
going
about
on
the
behind the
high
scenes.
high levels.
And we still thank you for your service.
Yes, that's a really good point.
I want to say this myself because that's a very important point, okay? Like I found out recently, I actually ended up talking to a very high-level military insider who was a 33rd degree Mason. And this was under friendly terms. He was not trying to do anything dark. He actually worked for the Alliance, knew about the Alliance. And I'm pretty good at this now, so I don't get miffed by something. So the guy's telling me, I'm like, yeah, you know, that ring on your finger, that's the Maltese cross, right? Are you a Knight of Malta? He said, yeah. Wow, that's pretty interesting. And, you know, are you all, I thought you guys were kind of at war with the Knight Templars. Well, it turns out he was in the Templars too. Like, well, these are kind of like opposing societies. He's like, well, I like to be in both, you know, so. And you're a 33rd degree Mason, huh? That's interesting. And I eventually kind of came out with it, and I said, dude, you know, the research I've done, like, for example, there was a book called Light on Masonry by David Bernard that came out in the 1800s, and it was the result of inquiries into the Cabal, or the Masonic Order in this case. And they published almost all of the rites and ceremonies and wordings that you have to do to get all the way through the 32 degrees of Masonry. They really didn't have very much about 32, and there was almost nothing about 33 in that book. But Bernard's Light on Masonry gets you everything up through 32. You can read exactly what they were learning. And I said to him stuff like, well, okay, from what I read of the way these things were published back then, like, for example, 31st degree, by that point, you are saying out loud that you have to crush the head of the serpent of religion. Did they ever make you say that? He said no. He said, look, David, I consider myself to be a Christian. I made it all the way up through 33rd degree. They never said anything to me that made me feel like there was anything about Lucifer or weird stuff or negative stuff at all. And I've heard, he says, I've heard that they have changed the rites, and that now it's only when you get into higher degrees above 33 that I don't even know about, that then now they give you this kind of stuff. So you could literally make it up to 33rd degree as a Mason and never hear about the Cabal, never hear about Lucifer. And I go, oh my God, I get it. Because now what are they going to do? They're going to let Masons take the fall. Guys that go all the way up to 33, they might not know anything about this stuff, because now they're just handing it out. And the other thing he told me that I found really fascinating, and again, I'm giving you guys another world exclusive here, so just, this is good for everybody. He told me that in the American Masonic lodges now, you'll go through a weekend in which you don't have to memorize this stuff anymore, unlike the European lodges where they still do. Like, he said the European lodges are hardcore. Like, you go in there, you got to know this stuff. You got to have it memorized. And if you don't, then you need to rehearse before you go into those meetings, because they will be like mad at you, right? But in America, you're literally sitting there with a book and you're just reading this stuff. Okay, you just did 8th degree, you just did 9th degree, you just did 10th degree. And you just read it all off the book, and you're not going to remember anything, you know, and you don't even really, a lot of people can't really think about what they're reading as they read it out loud, because those are two different parts of your brain, right? So, you know, there were certain things. I asked him, well, did you hear about Jabalun? And he said, yes. Okay, well, Jabalun has disturbed a lot of people because it's this kind of weird, kind of godlike thing that they talk about, where it's like it's a creature, it's got part animal this and part animal that. But for the most part, it's like, now they just run you through this stuff. You read it out of a book. You're not really having to learn any of it. And he said, again, all the way up through 33rd degree, it appears to be a Christian organization. And you believe in God, you believe in Jesus, you're fine. Nothing's going to upset you at all. So, wow, I did not realize that. And same thing goes with Knights of Malta, same thing goes with Knights Templar, believe it or not. He said, they've never said anything weird to me at all. So what they appear to have done is they took these initiatory orders that used to have this weird stuff in it, and they transmigrated it over to other ranks that you don't get invited into until you've already hit 33. So that's pretty fascinating. I'm sorry, I got way off on a tangent. I don't even remember what you guys asked me, but that came up.
This is the place for tangents, David.
That is true.
Don't miss part 3 of our exclusive interview with David Wilcock. We'll cover the mass arrests of the deep state, why the arts and spiritual enlightenment are important to the human race, and predictions for 2019. And make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode from the Edge of Wonder.